Hi, Smita. Thank you so much for joining us on herforum today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm just going to start off by introducing you briefly. Smita is a tech lawyer in the Silicon Valley. She is currently a product counsel at Apple and has served as the young privacy professional leader for the San Francisco Bay Area. She's also really passionate about women's rights and is the founder of the UN Women SF chapter. And prior to moving to the US, she worked at the Supreme Court as a litigation attorney in India, and then went on to pursue her master's at Berkeley. So I'm really excited to talk to Smita about her experience in tech law, which is personally a field that I'm very interested in. I wanted to start off by sort of taking you back to when you moved to the US, and you had completed your degree from Berkeley, and I wanted to know sort of what motivated you to stay on in the US and work in the tech law space. And I mean, tech law is something that's growing all over the world, even in India particularly. Bangalore is a hub for that. So did you ever consider moving back to India, and how did you make the decision to stay on and build your career over there?
Good question. So when I came to Berkeley, I came to do a specialization in law and technology. And so when I started to take those courses, I realized that there is an entire field called, IP transactions, which is kind of IP in tech law focused on just the transactional aspects of it, which is, I think, a very sort of unique practice that is growing here in law firms and in tech companies. And specifically because it's Silicon Valley, I felt like that was just a practice that appealed to me. And so I was, I felt like it was the right place, right time to do that practice here. And so I sort of just sat for the bar, and then got a job at a, great law firm. And so decided to see where it would take me. And it's been great so far.
Okay. So you're obviously currently working in a field, in a place which is the hub of innovation. And all of us have been reading about the advancements that are happening in this space. I read about a Stanford graduate who had made this app that is basically settles consumer disputes for you, like parking tickets and things like that. So I think we're moving closer and closer to what people call legal robots. So I wanted to understand from you, being where you are and doing the work that you do, to what extent do you think the legal field is already automated, and how far do you see it going in the near future?
I think there's a way to go. I am seeing some firms use, automation software for diligence or document review, essentially, to be able to catch the right kind of terms, to flag the right terms in terms of a mergers and acquisitions context that could be potentially problematic, something like that. But I think there's still a while to go before we can fully rely on automation for lawyering. But I'm hopeful and optimistic, and let's see. I'd be very interested to see how AI transforms the space in the future.
I agree with you, and I think that's very interesting, because especially feels like within IP itself, whether it's trademark filing, prosecution, there's a lot of that very obviously we can see very quickly being automated, right? So what aspect of it do you think is that will essentially need lawyers full term, because a lot of this is already automated in a lot of parts of the world?
I think generally, in terms of lawyering, there's an emotional intelligence quotient to it, in terms of how, when you negotiate deals, there's a lot of understanding where the other person's coming from, negotiating leverage. So I think there's some sort of human aspect to negotiations and even litigation, I would think, and I think that certainly would potentially be something that might be difficult for AI to emulate. But then again, I don't know. Who knows, right, what the future holds. But I would think that would be something that would be a little difficult to replace. So I think we can be safe for now. in our jobs.
Exactly. So, like you said, who knows, right? So, because I guess there's so much disruption happening. So, is there anything you feel that as someone in this generation of lawyers who are getting into, say, the tech law space, do you think that there are certain things that we need to be mindful of to be better prepared for a career, considering that times are changing and what was considered good enough to succeed 5 years ago is not good enough anymore? Are there certain aspects of law we should?
Yeah, I don't think AI is going to affect how lawyers opportunities in that way. I think if anything, it's going to be an aid for lawyers to perhaps not do all the admin tasks of, just reviewing provisions in the contract or something. But I think the tech law is a very burgeoning field and definitely something that I highly encourage young lawyers to consider. And if anything, someone has to operate the AI software. The AI software messes something up, someone's going to get sued, right? So I think there's always going to be opportunities for lawyers to step in and make a difference. So I wouldn't see AI as being necessarily something that lawyers have to worry about. I think it's something they should probably be excited about.
That's really comforting to hear, and that's great. I think what you said is correct. It probably will go hand in hand. So moving on, I mean, you have worked with a lot of like some of the biggest technology companies, and I remember reading about you talking about how you've worked with companies that have really disrupted a lot of different market spaces. Could you talk about some of the most exciting or challenging deals? I mean, of course, not specifically, but experiences that you've had in this space and moments in your career so far that you felt were really impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has been so challenging and satisfying in the sense of, I worked with a lot of startups back at my law firms, and I think a lot of deals and a lot of like issues that impact startups in like the AI space, in like robotics, and in so many other things that people are just thinking of are so unique. So a lot of it is just sort of you sort of analyzing the law based on first impressions. There isn't a precedent. There isn't a form template agreement you can sort of look at. You're making the template, right? Like you're making you're the first. You might be one of the first lawyers to even have considered the problem because you're dealing with one of the companies to have first created the tech. So I think particularly back in 2017, I remember there was a spate of blockchain companies that were starting to sort of come to the fore. And that was very exciting because, again, people were just still trying to understand what the tech was. And so that was very exciting to be one of the few lawyers at that time to be really in this space and working with very exciting companies. So it's been a fun ride.
Okay, that's really cool. I also wanted to touch a bit upon data privacy because I know that's a field you have a lot of expertise in as well. I know in California they just passed the California Privacy Protection Act some time ago, and in India, of course, it's a law that's still developing. And in fact, in 2017, in the Puttaswamy judgment, they held right to privacy as a constitutional right, and now the data protection bill is underway, but there's also a lot of debate around that and how something like this would include a lot of government intervention and a lot of increase in what companies would have to comply by. So what are your views on the future of data privacy around the world and maybe even specifically in India, since it's still a law that's developing here?
Right. So I think in general, a lot of countries and companies are coming to realize that this is like an important facet. Something that's important to consumers, something that's important to companies. And again, data security goes hand in hand with that. So I think where we're going to probably end up is that, possibly all the countries and all the companies out there are going to adopt sort of the most stringent standard out there. So like if, let's say it's the GDPR in the EU or it's the CCPA in California, or, the India Data Protection Bill in India, or whatever happens to be, I think the sort of the highest, the most stringent form is probably going to be the one adopted, because I think a lot of companies are not going to want to do I just think it might be the most effective way of complying with everything, to just be at that adoption point where you're already complying with the most stringent law out there, and I think that is going to be we'll see how that plays out, but I think that's still sort of an evolving field as to what the market and what consumers are comfortable with, and what consumers sort of realize they have rights to. And so I think it's definitely a space to watch, and I can definitely see that the GDPR, the CCPA is definitely having an effect on other countries that are also sort of coming sort of up to speed on what data privacy means, and how and the importance of it.
And so the legal tech space is something which is, of course, like evolving rapidly right now compared to other fields of law. But and a lot of other fields of law have been around for decades. But I think that I'm not sure how it was when you really got into the field. So were there a lot of women in tech law when you joined? And
I mean, certainly not a lot of women. I don't think there are a lot of women in any of the rooms where they belong. So I think that's definitely just something that we are building on and working towards, and certainly that's something that requires change. But having said that, there were certainly a few role models that I've had along the way. A few professors, bosses, peers, colleagues, friends, that are really sort of killing it in this space. They're very inspiring. And so, I've been fortunate to definitely see some people that are doing great work in the space. But having said that, you should always feel like you can be the first one to do something. Certainly, you don't have to be like, well, I don't see a female CEO, so should I not aspire to be a CEO? Certainly not. Definitely break the barriers, and I think just sort of not have, just don't let that be an impediment to you trying to achieve something.
Is there anyone specific who comes to mind for you? I mean, not just in tech law, but in general, like when you started off, someone you looked up to as a female lawyer?
Actually, I had a female boss. So she's still a mentor of mine at Berkeley. Her name was Shannon Jaworski. She's a terrific lawyer and a genuinely nice human being who has really helped, I think, all of her female colleagues and mentees to sort of succeed. So she still remains a very good friend, and then also, a great lawyer and a great mentor.
Okay. You have extensive experience working in this field, and it's constantly advancing in the current ecosystem. But we're currently also living in a time which is extremely disruptive, considering the current times, which would I see like a lot of big challenges post-COVID for a lot of different industries. What do you see as the biggest changes that would happen in terms of technology companies post-COVID?
I think there's just, obviously there's going to be differences in, I mean, not even, I don't think the question should even be phrased just for like tech companies. I think there's going to be a new normal generally in how people behave and, how our life is. So certainly I'm not an expert on that, but, there's just going to be a difference in how we buy things, how we interact with each other. I think, something from like general context, like starting a new job. I mean, I just read an article today about like how it's going to be so much different to onboard someone when they start in the middle of a pandemic. Certainly, right? Like, definitely a debate can happen over like how do you balance that need of getting people up to speed, but then also being mindful of the fact that there is a pandemic going on. So I think definitely the world post-COVID is going to be different. And I think, as you mentioned, it's definitely, I think, contactless payment options, I'm assuming would be a great idea. I think definitely strides that are made in artificial intelligence to limit person-to-person contact would probably be really successful. So yeah, certainly there's I see a lot of opportunity for tech to step in and help. Certainly, like contact tracing is already contact tracing apps out there have already really helped. So, right. I'd be interested to have this conversation once we are post COVID, because I'm excited about that stage.
And I love that you're so positive about it, and see that as like so much opportunity. But especially from a legal perspective, I think a lot of people are also talking about how it's great that tech is going to play a role, and that's so exciting. But there are also certain things that a lot of people feel can't be overcome. For example, whether it's going to court and being able to deliver arguments, which a lot of people feel would be a lot more convincing and impactful than if it was done digitally. So those factors which are very obviously going to be affected negatively, do you see any ways to overcome that? Do you think we would have to?
I'm sure like the procedure will evolve, the judges will evolve, the courts will evolve, the plaintiffs and the defendants will evolve. Like, I think it's certainly, if there are challenges, there will certainly be other measures that people put in place to overcome them. Definitely there's an argument to be made, as you just made it, about how being in person adds a sort of human quotient and emotional quotient, and makes your arguments more forceful. But perhaps then we'll have these video conferencing technologies evolve to a point where that's hopefully largely mitigated, or just technologies that we use to provide arguments are again advanced to a stage where largely we can be as persuasive and as effective without having been sort of in court in person.
Right. Okay, so just changing course slightly, I read like a beautiful poem that you wrote recently in relation to the current movement, of course, that's happening in the US and around the world. And as an Indian woman with a successful career in the Bay Area, do you have any advice for how women of color can, succeed in the workplace, or just in general for how to navigate, and are there any things that you see changing with the current climate?
I think certainly it's just like I said, it's sometimes I feel like it's almost a cliche, but I think it's very important to sort of just believe in your abilities and believe in yourself. Think that you could possibly be the first woman in a room. If it's just full of people that don't look like you, enter it anyway. And then also, once you enter the room, bring more people behind you. Just leave the door open and let other people sort of come in, so you don't have to be the only person who looks like you do. So certainly I think a large part of that has been just being a little bit adventurous, a little bit curious, and a little bit brave. And I think that's all you need in terms of how to succeed in conventional terms. Or I think really I feel like a lot of women in India, a lot of women all across the world have been doing really great work, and I'm only seeing progress. So I'm very optimistic about the future, and from what movements around the world are going to, and the way that they're going to impact women's rights.
Right, and I see you doing that as well in terms of, I know you started the UN Women San Francisco chapter. So, could you briefly...
let me correct you there. I didn't start the UN Women SF chapter. I started the Young Professionals Committee under the UN Women USA SF chapter.
Okay.
So Yeah, just wanted to make that
You
distinction.
started the Young Professionals Committee.
That's right.
Okay.
Which is sort of sits under the umbrella of the UN Women USA SF chapter, and tries to essentially promote, encourage, and like empower women that are just sort of starting out in their professional journey. We try and connect mentors and mentees within the community. We try and we're working on providing perhaps programming that will help be relevant to them in their job search, or just generally providing a space in which they can share and meet other people that are have the same sort of challenges and pitfalls. So yeah, very excited about that. That's definitely been something that's very that I'm very passionate about. Sort of like I said, letting other women also sort of succeed, empowering them, mentoring where I can. I think it's definitely important for all of us to rise together.
I think that's amazing, and I think that's probably the most important thing and very encouraging for a lot of people. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, and this was great, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.